Hello and welcome to Age of Jackson, Part 2, Conflicts and Compromise. Let's get started. Jackson was the people's president. After defeating John Quincy Adams in the election of 1828 with support of the common or everyday man, he employs his supporters in the spoils system. But trouble was looming in the South. In the North, factories were booming. The Industrial Revolution led to expanding cities, and interchangeable parts meant that products can be mass-produced. England also underwent an industrial revolution. So, to protect American businesses, a tariff was placed on imported goods, making it cheaper to buy American-made products. In the South, however, the economy relied on the plantation system and the sales of cotton. Southerners have to purchase most manufactured goods, and Britain was a major buyer of cotton. The tariff hurt sales of cotton and the Southern economy. The South felt that the government was interfering in their economy and imposing taxes that favored the North without their consent. Southerners nicknamed the tariff of abominations. In 1828, Congress passed a new high tariff that angered the South. The South could no longer easily trade crops with other countries. They called it the tariff of abominations. John C. Calhoun argued that the right of Southern states had a right to nullify or cancel or ignore the federal law. In 1828, the tariff of abominations was passed, resulting in a higher tariff. In 1832, a lower tariff was passed, but this still angered South Carolinians. South Carolina declared the federal tariff null and void, or canceled, within its borders. Delegates to a special convention urged the state legislature to take military action and secede from the Union if the federal government demanded the customs duties or the tariff. To prevent a civil war, Henry Clay proposed the Compromise Tariff of 1833, in which the government gradually reduced the tariffs. The issues arising over states' rights contributed to sectional differences between the North and the South. The nullification crisis and states' rights revolved around the ability of a state to declare a federal law unconstitutional and to nullify said law. This goes against the 10th Amendment, which says that powers are shared between the state and the federal government, but if the federal government makes a law, then the federal government's law is always supreme. South Carolina passed the Nullification Act, which officially ignored the tariff. South Carolina threatened to secede or leave the Union if the U.S. tried to enforce the unfair tariff. Jackson was ready to fight and got help from the Congress, which passed the Force Bill. South Carolina gave in after the threat of Jackson, and Henry Clay developed a compromise to gradually reduce the tariff over the next 10 years. Jackson also had a disdain for the bank, and that led to the destruction of the Second Bank of the United States. Jackson wanted to destroy the national bank because he felt it favored the wealthy or the rich class. He ordered all the money in the national bank to be placed into state banks that were more likely to lend to farmers. Jackson refused to renew the national bank when its charter expired. In McCulloch versus Maryland, you'll remember that it addressed the issue of state versus federal power. The decision in McCulloch upheld the principle of implied powers, meaning that the U.S. government did have a right to have a national bank, and it also strengthened the power of the federal government. Finally, we need to talk about the Missouri Compromise. So as new states came into the Union as part of the Louisiana Territory, Missouri wanted to enter, and Missouri wanted to enter as a slave state. However, the North and the South had to keep the number of free and slave states balanced because it was already really tense and they were trying to avoid war. So they compromised. Missouri was added as a slave state and Maine was added as a free state. Slavery would not be allowed in the rest of the Louisiana Purchase north of the 3630 line of latitude. This was one of the first major compromises since the Three-Fifths Compromise regarding the issue of slavery and its impact on representation. Again, the more population you have, the more power you have in the House of Representatives. And so the Union was saved from crisis by President Andrew Jackson and the Compromise. Next time, will conflicts over land and the discovery of gold allow Andrew Jackson to remain a hero, or will he fall to become a villain?